Pratap Chatterjee, you have an interesting section in your report, Goodbye Houston, called Dressing for Dubai. Dress to impress, do you know what to wear when you travel? And it shows you what's not appropriate, which is wearing a T-shirt that says Army, and what's appropriate, one that has no words on it.
Amy, the reason for this is in Dubai and in the Middle East, in fact, there's a lot of anger towards Americans and towards the occupation of Iraq, and therefore also to the contract workers that are there. And having been to Dubai myself several times, you notice, in fact, in contrast to, let's say, neighboring Kuwait, that the soldiers dress down. They go out in civilian clothes because they don't want to attract attention. And so on the one hand, this article that you're citing, in fact, comes from Halliburton's own internal newsletter called The Monthly Mirror, where they show these two photographs of the man, what they should wear, which is to dress down and pretend to be an ordinary civilian, as opposed to wearing a KBR hat, a Halliburton hat, or an army shirt, which would indicate they were part of the occupation forces in Iraq, because they know that's a flashpoint. I mean, remember that dozens of Halliburton workers have been killed in Iraq, and more from other companies, in fact, a company called Titan. And so they are worried that, in fact, that people will see them as collaborators and see them as part of this whole American experiment in the Middle East. And so they are advising their workers to pretend that they are just ordinary civilians as opposed to involved with the American occupation of Iraq.
Pratap, I was watching Senator Mitch McConnell this weekend on CNN saying that it's outrageous that the Iraqi government has yet to move on, that the parliament there has yet to vote on the new law that would open up the country to multinational oil companies. What about that law?
Well, Amy, the fact that the Parliament has started to discuss this oil law is a good thing. I mean, the public should be able to debate an oil law. Remember, this oil law was drafted in secret. I met one of the men working on it, Ronald Jonkers, from a company called Bearing Point, and they have worked, you know, in the green zone in Baghdad to draft a law and hand it over to Iraqi lawmakers, and the Bush administration has put pressure on them to sign it by this May because they want it to go forward as one of the benchmarks for the U.S. to withdraw. And the law as it's drafted, it's a terrible law. It's designed to try and please everybody and pleases nobody at all. And in fact, it is particularly intended to please multinational oil companies. Iraq needs a lot of money in order to be able to develop its oil fields. They talk about in the region of $100 billion. And so in order to get it, they say the only possibility is to get it from the oil companies. And therefore, they are requiring in the oil law that long-term leases be signed with oil companies from outside the country. Now, Iraqi oil unions oppose this law. A lot of Iraqi parliamentarians oppose this law because they see it as giving up their state assets to foreign companies. The reality of this law is that it leaves very little room for negotiation, which is critical in these laws. I mean, take the case of Bolivia recently. Bolivia recently renegotiated its oil leases with oil companies in order to ensure that more income comes to the people as opposed to just out to foreign oil companies. And that's really critical, that this law be debated as opposed to be rammed through, written by a company like Bearing Point, and rammed through without much discussion. So it is, in fact, flawed in any way you see because of the way the control is divided up between the different regions and the central government. Everybody is unhappy with it. And so it looks unlikely to get passed unless there's complete pressure by the U.S. government, which is why there's so much resistance.
Finally, we just have 30 seconds, but your plans for the shareholders meeting
At the shareholders meeting, Amy, I, as a shareholder, will attend. Outside, there will be protests by groups like Houston Global Awareness at 2301 Millband Avenue in the Woodlands, which is about 30 miles from Houston. So people will be hosting a goodbye party. They have money with them, Halliburton bucks, which they're going to be giving away. It's a goodbye party for David Lessar because he's leaving town, and they want to wish him bon voyage to Dubai as he takes the money and runs from the United States, from Houston to the United Arab Emirates.
Pratap Chatterjee, thanks very much for being with us. Investigative journalist, managing editor of Corp Watch, which investigates and exposes corporate crimes. Pratap is also author of the book Iraq Inc., A Profitable Occupation, joining us from Houston.